After starting this module, you shall be able to know about the international economic integration or regional trade agreements, understand the different types of regional trade agreements, understand and evaluate the welfare impacts of a regional integration, analyze the growth trends in the major RTAs over years and in terms of their coverage. Now, I will give a brief introduction of module. Regional Trade Agreement (RTA) is a preferential economic arrangement within a group of countries wherein the members of an RTA reduce or eliminate the tariff levels amongst themselves. However, separate set of rules is laid for non-members. Let us now consider the types of economic integration. The regional trade agreements or economic integration exist in various forms. First type of economic integration is preferential trade agreement or partial scope agreement. It is an agreement between countries that reduces tariffs for certain products for the countries that sign the agreement. The members of the agreement can maintain their separate trade policies with respect to non-member countries. The example of such an agreement involves South Asian Preferential Trade Agreement (SAPTA). Second type of economic integration is free trade area. It involves free trade among the member countries. However, each member of the free trade area is allowed to determine its own separate commercial policy with respect to non-members. For instance, North America Free Trade Area (NAFTA). Third type of economic integration is customs union. It focuses on the existence of free trade among the member nations. In addition to this, the member countries also adopt a uniform commercial policy against the non-members in the form of common external tariff. For instance, European Economic Community (EEC). Four types of economic integration is common market. In such a framework, the member countries eliminate internal trade barriers, adopt common external trade policies, and allow free movement of resources vis-a-vis capital, labor and technology among them. For instance, Mercosur Southern Cone Market, East African Common Market and West African Common Market. Fifth type of economic integration is economic union. An economic union involves elimination of the internal barriers among the member countries, adoption of common external barriers, free movement of resources and adoption of a uniform set of economic policies. An example of an economic union is the European Union (EU) with a uniform currency. The region adopted one monetary policy. Sixth type of economic integration is political union. It involves full economic integration, monetary, fiscal integration and political integration among the member countries. The United States is an example of such union. Now, we will look at welfare impacts of trade agreements. When the countries enter into a regional trade agreement (RTA), the members of the RTA reduce or eliminate the tariff levels amongst themselves. This leads to lower price imports from one member country to another, thereby increasing the demand of the consumers of the member country that is importing from the other member country of the RTA. This gives rise to additional trade that is created due to the RTA between the countries. This process is termed as trade creation. However, the non-member countries of the RTA suffer a loss in this process. The trade is diverted away from the efficient non-member producers because of the lower or zero tariff levels amongst the member countries of the RTA. This process is termed as trade diversion. Trade creation and trade diversion effects were introduced by Weiner 1950. As trade creation and trade diversion move in the opposite directions, the impact of the RTAs can be analyzed through a net effect of trade creation and trade diversion. Whether the overall effect of an RTA would be welfare enhancing with trade creation outweighing trade diversion is essentially an empirical question. Let us now look at an example. Consider an economy A that trades with other two economies B and C. Focusing on A's imports from its trading partners, country C is a low-cost producer with price PC as $10 as compared to country B with price PB as $12. Country C exports amount 10 QS minus QD. Suppose country A imposes a tariff of $4 on its trading partners, resulting in increased prices of countries B and C, namely PB plus T and PC plus T. Even in this scenario, country C remains a low-cost producer. However, the export quantity of country C shrinks to 4 as a result of the tariff. If country A enters into a trade agreement with country B, which is a high-cost producer, and removes the tariff from B's good, then B's price is back to its earlier level, that is, PB is equal to 12. However, country C stays at increased price level of $14. Therefore, now country B becomes the low-cost producer and it exports quantity 6, QS minus QD. This agreement therefore creates trade from previous export level of 4. This trade creation is noted by triangles E and F. By entering an agreement with B and not C, which is the low-cost producer, country A has diverted trade away from C. The trade diversion is depicted in by rectangle G. Finally, if the area E plus F is greater than the area of G, world welfare will increase and vice versa. Therefore, the net impact of a trade agreement depends on the magnitude of the trade creation and trade diversion effects. In literature of regional trade agreements, many studies have evaluated the effects of the formation of the RTAs on the trade flows among the member countries of the RTAs as well as on the trade of the member countries with the non-member countries, thereby evaluating the success or failure of the RTAs. This resulted in a theoretical foundation which provided an alternative angle through which a Wiener's evaluation of RTAs could be viewed. This was primarily laid down in the Kemp-Wennick model. According to this theorem, an RTA could be formed in such a manner that it makes the participating countries better off without making non-participating ones worse off. To discuss and understand this theorem, we divide the theorem in two parts: trade effects among members and vis-a-vis rest of the world. As far as the first part of trade effect is concerned, a tariff reduction under the RTA framework involves three-step procedure for benefits. First, members of RTAs can increase their revenue by exporting more to other members due to enhanced market access under trade liberalization in the region. Second, they can import cheaper factors of production from member countries, which thereby results in cost saving. Thirdly, members also have revenue loss effects with respect to non-members. However, revenue compensatory mechanism within the RTA framework has the ability to offset such losses. As for the second trade effect with respect to non-members, there exists a possibility of demand and supply adjustment through exports and imports with the rest of the world due to unique characteristics of products that can only be traded with the rest of the world. For many members of an RTA, oil imports from OPEC countries cannot be replaced by other RTA members. Therefore, establishing that the trade openness in an RTA framework is not at the expense of the trade relations of the member countries with the rest of the world. This is put into theoretical perspective by stating an equilibrium condition whereby post-RTA trade volumes at post-RTA prices of RTA members vis-a-vis rest of the world need to be at least equal to pre-RTA trade volumes at post-RTA prices. According to Panagria 2000, this is considered as Kemp-Van-Venek-Oyama theorem, according to which outside countries will be protected from being harmed provided the union's total imports from them do not decline after the formation of the union. This sufficiency condition for them not to suffer a welfare loss is expressed P1 E0 greater or equal to P1 E1, where P is price, E the net exports, and 0 and 1 imply pre and post union equilibria. Further, E0 and E1 are positive and negative in the cases of exports and imports respectively. Welfare of non-members improves provided their pre-union net exports vector generates a larger trade surplus than their post-union net exports vector at post-union prices. The inequality in the equation implies a trade deficit or surplus in both pre- and post-trade union. The above two trade effects combined can ensure that while RTA members are better off among themselves without worsening of their trade relations with the rest of the world. In other words, the Kemp-Venek theorem is similar to Pareto optimality in the context of an RTA. In addition to this, Krugman demonstrates that the cost of preferential trade agreements formed between natural trading partners are likely to be lower than that for pacts between countries that do not mutually trade on an intensive basis. On the other hand, Panagria 2000 concludes that RTAs lead to spaghetti ball effect as suggested by Bhagwati 1995. According to this effect, the existence of complex rules of origin makes it difficult to determine the country of origin, resulting in high administration cost. With implementation of these rules of origin to different FTAs, the process becomes more complicated and costly. Summing up, it can be observed that the impact of regional economic integration on the trade is ambiguous. Some part of the literature concludes that RTAs have trade creating effects, whereas the other part finds evidence of trade diversion effects that are welfare reducing. The final outcome depends on the magnitude of both the effects, and that is, the stronger effect dominates and identifies the impact of the integration on the trade. Next, we will look at growth of regional trade agreements. The number of RTAs in force has been increasing steadily. This trend is likely to continue and strengthen with many RTAs under the negotiation phase. Of these RTAs, free trade agreements, FTAs, and partial scope agreements account for 90%, while custom unions account for 10%. As of 7th April 2015, around 612 notifications of RTAs, counting goods, services, and accessions separately, had been received by the GATT WTO. Out of these, 426 notifications were made under Article 24 of the GATT 1947 or GATT 1994, 39 under the Enabling Clause, and 147 under Article 5 of the GATTs. Out of these 612 RTAs, 406 were in force, WTO 2015. Regional trade agreements, RTAs, have shown an unprecedented growth over the last few years. Figure shows the growth in number of RTAs over time. The growth of RTAs accelerated in 1995 with the establishment of World Trade Organization WTO. It should be noted that the figure excludes the non-notified RTAs, which will make the number even higher. Major RTAs and intra-regional trade. There has been a rise of intra-regional trade in different RTAs over the years. A clear trend has been observed in various regional economic groupings, where intra-exports and intra-imports, that is, the exports and imports within a particular RTA, have been rising. Following table provide the information about the most famous RTAs around the globe and their intra-regional trade respectively. The trends observed in various regional economic groupings where intra-regional exports or intra-regional imports, that is, the exports and imports within a particular RTA, have three dimensions. First, the intra-regional trade has assumed considerable importance in RTAs. For instance, the share of intra-regional in total exports in 2012 was 62.66% in the European Union (EU), 48.53% in NAFTA and 25.95% in ASEAN. Secondly, the importance of intra-regional trade is relatively and quite significantly much more for the RTAs in the developed world as compared to the developing world. Thirdly, most importantly, RTAs both in the developed world and the developing world alike have displayed a dynamic trend between 2003 and 2012. See figure 3 and figure 4. The dip in this trend across RTAs reflected in the data for intra-RTA exports and imports expressed in value terms in 2009 is quite evidently due to the reduced economic activity as a result of the global economic slowdown which began in 2008. However, the upward trend in 2010 during the global economic recovery suggests that economic activity is a major determinant of intra-RTA exports-imports. The dip in intra-regional trade in the European Union is a reflection of the after effects of Euro crisis. Depth of RTAs. A very important feature of the growth of RTAs is the increasing depth of regional integration across RTAs. This is crucial as it influences the very economics of RTAs by allowing members to tap the economic complementarities not in an isolated manner in the respective realms of goods and services but in a synergistic manner. Accordingly, attempts to liberalize trade in goods and services reinforce each other, hence contribute to trade augmentation in general at the regional bilateral level. It has been observed that the maximum number of RTAs is associated with goods. There is only one RTA, that is European Economic Area EEA, covering only the services. In between these two lie the RTAs with the coverage of both goods and services. It can be inferred that trade and services have entered into the RTAs with the RTAs based on both goods and services amounting to 121. This shows an extensive coverage of RTAs covering goods as well as services as compared to traditional RTAs based on solely goods. Moreover, the modern day RTAs are becoming more comprehensive by including not trade in goods and services but also investment and several other areas of cooperation. Let's summarize the discussion we have done so far. Regional Trade Agreement (RTA) is a preferential economic arrangement within a group of countries wherein the members of an RTA reduce or eliminate the tariff levels amongst themselves. The regional trade agreements exist in various forms: preferential trade agreement, free trade area, customs union, common market, economic union, political union. Welfare impacts of an RTA depends on the magnitude of trade creation and trade diversion. inter-regional exports in the major RTAs have been rising over years. The importance of intra-regional trade is relatively and quite significantly much more for the RTAs in the developed world as compared to the developing world. A very important feature of the growth of RTAs is the increasing depth of regional integration across RTAs. This shows an extensive coverage of RTAs covering goods as well as services as compared to traditional RTAs based on solely goods. Thank you.